special meeting of the Salisbury City Council. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and I'd like to take a moment for silent meditation or prayer. Thank you. I'll now entertain a motion and a second to adopt the legislative agenda.
So move.
Second.
Ms. Jackson, Mr. Boda. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Mr. Boda?
Aye.
Ms. Jackson?
Aye.
Ms. Blake?
Aye.
Mrs. Gregory?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. This afternoon, we have several public hearings, and we'll proceed in the following manner. Once I open the hearing, we'll ask for any of those people who want to be heard to address Julia and send a chat message to her saying that you want to testify. Then you will be sworn in individually, state your name and your residence, and then you'll be given 4 minutes to make your statement. If while speaking on the topic, you agree with what a previous person has said, please just say, I concur and support what the person said. If you have something new to add, please do so and observe the 4-minute limit. We thank you for your participation. I will now ask Mr. Tillman to read ordinance number 2593. Mr. Tillman.
He's muted. Here we go.
This is an ordinance appropriating the necessary funds for the operation of the government and administration of the city of Salisbury, Maryland for the period from July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2021, establishing the levy for the general fund for the same fiscal period and establishing the appropriation for the water and sewer, parking authority, city marina, and stormwater funds. Be it ordained by the city of Salisbury, Maryland, that the amounts listed in Schedule A operating budget appropriations are hereby appropriated for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2020 and ending June 30th, 2021 to fund operations of the city of Salisbury, Maryland. And be it further ordained by the city of Salisbury, Maryland, the amounts listed in Schedule B capital project appropriations are hereby appropriated for capital projects. And be it further ordained by the city of Salisbury, Maryland, the amounts listed in Schedule C, anticipated grant expenditures are hereby appropriated for the grants listed, and the mayor is authorized to enter into any necessary agreements or memoranda in order to receive and expend these funds. And be it further ordained that the tax levy be, and the same is hereby set, at $0.9832 per $100 of assessed valuation of all real property, at $3.51 per $100 of assessed valuation for all personal property categorized as utilities, and at $2.40 per 100 of assessed valuation for all other personal property subject to taxation by the city of Salisbury for general fund purposes, including debt service purposes, exclusive of revenues derived from the water and sewer fund for debt service purposes attributable to water and sewer activities. And all taxes levied by this ordinance shall be liens from and after July 1st, 2020, and shall be due and payable at as specified in Title 14 of the Tax Property Article, the Annotated Code of Maryland as amended. And be further ordained by the City of Salisbury Council that a public hearing on the proposed budget ordinance is to be held at this time by Zoom instead of 301 Government Office Building.
Thank you, Mr. Tillman. At this time, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone who wishes to speak, please identify yourself to Ms. Glanz.
Do not open that up.
So Jack, first up, we have Brett Hopkins who would like to speak. And again, if you'd like to speak, please write in the chat. Just write in the chat box your name and I'll call on you on that order. So Brett Hopkins is up first.
All right, Mr. Hopkins, we will have Ms. Nichols please swear you in right now, and you will have 4 minutes to make your comments.
Brett is muted.
Ms. Nichols?
Oh, hold on. I gotta unmute her too. Kim, you're unmuted.
Thank you. Mr. Hopkins, if you would please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Hopkins,
Okay,
please state your residence.
This is Brett Hopkins. My temporary residence is at 925 Eastern Shore Drive in Salisbury. My permanent address is my home in Fairfax Station, Virginia.
Thank you. Go right ahead.
Okay. All right. I sent in a response regarding the regarding the fee increases for landlord business license as well as rental unit registration fees, going up by $25 per unit and on the business license. And I think that issue is null and void now, because I think that fee increases can be taken off the table. If that's true, I'd like to shorten my comments to just talk about late fees and rent increases, if that's possible.
Go right ahead.
Okay. Late fees and rent increases, which I think are going to be discussed later today, those can be discussed, but we have to keep in context that owner-operators of multifamily apartment buildings, single-family homes, et cetera, have to conform to fair housing rules and regulations. And whatever we do to one renter, we must do to all. Otherwise, we expose ourselves to fair housing violations. And I would ask that the city council and the mayor consider that, so that whatever we end up with, and hopefully less is more, less government restrictions is better, that's taken into consideration, and we being owner operators, be brought into the discussion to make sure that we can conform to whatever it is the final outcome is. Because we can't get crosswise with fair housing regulations and court actions potentially. So I just ask that we discuss that, maybe not tonight, but in more detail after the fact, before we finalize any agreements or executive orders or that kind of thing. And that's all I had to talk about at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Hopkins. Appreciate it. Julia, next up.
Next up is John Cannon.
John, we'll now have
Excuse me?
Ms. Nichols swear you in.
Certainly. Thank you.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
If you'll raise your right hand, do you solemnly swear or affirm that this testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Thank you.
Thank you. If you would please stick to the topic also at hand. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. President and Council, I appreciate the opportunity to speak. My discussion is also in reference to the rent increase freeze, as well as the late fees. First of all, with the ordinance as a whole, I saw where several landlords, I think, took offense, rightfully so, to terms that were used, such as protecting tenants from abuse, also referring to unscrupulous landlords. We're referring to an ordinance that's referencing rent increases and late fees. Any rent increases and late fees were already included in a lease over a year ago. 90% of the time, I don't even implement rent increases in particular. But that being said, I don't see what is so unscrupulous or could be characterized as such simply because it's part of what a landlord has in its lease. It is their obligation to go through with that. If the city sees differently, so be it. But you're talking about an industry that's already being compromised. Currently, we have 3 months of delays due to the court close. We're looking at another 2 months where the adjudication of any of these cases is not going to happen until probably through July. If there's an eviction to take place, it's going to be probably a month or two after that. So you have an industry that's already suffering from 6 to 7 months of income that is currently lost. I recognize, what you're attempting to do on behalf of, the renters, who I guess you could characterize as downtrodden. But, the reality of it is, we have many landlords who are also suffering. The U.S. Census Bureau states that 50% of landlords own one property, 24% own only 2 or 3 properties. So these are people who have mortgages to pay and property taxes that are due. And they are family owners. They're not, not necessarily a large corporation. So I think you need to take that into consideration. I know I have clients that are in that case. Some clients are talking about the fact that they have to dip into their 401ks in order to survive what's happening today. But to make this quick, what I would like to suggest, or at least to propose, is that first of all, I would propose that you vote against the ordinance. If you're going to pass it, I would suggest that you strike the term from abuse in the first paragraph. I would suggest
John,
excuse me,
John, if I could interrupt you.
Yes,
This ordinance and the things you're referring to are not part of the budget that this hearing's supposed to be about. If you'd like to make comments during the council meeting, that's fine relative to any ordinances that we have. But this is specifically on the budget itself.
All right. Well, I apologize. I wasn't quite too clear of what the format was. There appeared to me to be 2 separate agendas that I received via email for 4:30 meetings.
Well, one of them is the work session, and one of them is the public hearings on the budget.
Oh, okay. I apologize. Then, okay. I guess that's why they said stick to the subject.
Yeah, no problem.
What would be the time frame, Mr. President, for the discussion of this?
Well, you can tune into the after this meeting, after the public hearings are done, we're going to go into work session. You can listen to that, and you have the ability to send chat comments in through Julia again, and then we will take those into consideration.
Right. I guess that leads to another question, which I've had from a lot of landlords, and I don't know, but the city meetings, I knew that you used to be able to speak during work sessions, but you had to sign up first. Is that still the process with your work sessions with the city?
Well, right now we're doing it through chat, obviously, because we're not meeting in public. We're not meeting in the room, the same room. So if you just put your comment or question down to Julia, then we can share that.
Okay. The reason I asked that because I have about 5 recommendations or 6 recommendations on amendments to the ordinance.
Then I would what I would do is I would forward them to the council, because we have another meeting on those topics. So if you could forward those to the council, that would be great. You can send them to me if you'd like, and I'll make sure, or send them to Ms. Glantz.
All right. Okay. So
Okay.
Sorry about the misunderstanding. Thank you for your patience. Have a good day.
No problem at all. Thank you. Ms. Glantz, next up.
I don't see anybody else yet. If there's anybody that can't figure out the chat function or doesn't have access to it, looks like Lynn. Yep, Lynne Brennan. There you go.
Good afternoon. It's a very cold, dreary day. Thank you for hosting the budget hearing on this beautiful day in the Delmarva neighborhoods that you can tomorrow might be different. First, I would like to congratulate the mayor and the city council and all those who put together the next step initiatives today. I saw a lot of good things in that. I know that that's going to impact budgets. And so
Lynn, I'm
that's why
sorry.
I did it. Oh, I
Kim's
have to
gonna
be
swear
sworn
you
in.
in.
I
Yeah,
have to be sworn in.
sorry.
I have my hand up.
Kim, you're unmuted.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Would you raise your right hand, please? Thank you. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'll go back and just again reiterate that I do want to congratulate the city council and the mayor and all those that were involved in that initiative to bring some awareness to putting out multi-language, linguistically information for our residents that don't necessarily speak English as a first language. I think that's an outstanding move, having a daughter who's a linguist. I absolutely think that's amazingly wonderful. And thank you very much for that. There's also some money in there for the renters. And I know all those are going to impact budget. So that's why I just threw that in right now. I do want to, again, mention that the discussion concerning the 25% increase on rental fees and landlord registrations, I'm glad that that seems to be off the table. So thank you very much for that. And I'll come back to the other meeting later on this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Ms. Clance, anyone else?
Not in the chat. Anybody else want to unmute themselves if they want to speak?
All right, seeing that there are none, I will close this public hearing. And at this time, I'll ask Mr. Tillman to present ordinance number 2594. Mr. Tillman.
Thank you. All right, ordinance number 2594 is an ordinance of the city of Salisbury to establish that there is no rate change for the water and sewer rates. It is effective for all bills dated October 1st, 2020 and thereafter, unless and until subsequently revised or changed. Whereas the water and sewer rates must be revised in accordance with the proposed fiscal year 2021 budget of the city of Salisbury and the appropriations thereby made and established for the purposes of the water and sewer departments, now therefore be it ordained and enacted by the council of the city of Salisbury that the following water and sewer rate schedule shall be adopted by the city of Salisbury. At the first reading, I read all these rates. Would you like me to do that again?
Well, I think we should, yeah.
Okay. All right. It's my understanding that these rates are unchanged. The water and sewer rate schedule, Schedule 1, metered water changes in the city rates. Residential and small commercial, there's a minimum charge of $22.45 per quarter and a commodity charge of $3.35 per 1,000 gallons. For the commercial, there is a customer charge of $420.08 per quarter and a commodity charge of $1.95 per 1,000 gallons. Large commercial industrial, customer charge of $649.22 per quarter and $1.55 per 1,000 gallons. Under Schedule 2, metered water charges outside city rates. The residential and small commercial, the minimum charge is $44.90 per quarter. The commodity charge is $6.70 per 1,000 gallons. The commercial customer charge is $840.17 per quarter. The commodity charge is $3.90 per 1,000 gallons. For large commercial industrial, the customer charge is $1,298.45 per quarter, and the commodity charge is $3.14 per 1,000 gallons. Under Schedule 3, metered water charges, Warwick Community College and Urban Service District rates, residential and small commercial, minimum charge of $33.66 per quarter, commodity charge of $5.03 per 1,000 gallons. For commercial, customer charge of $630.13 per quarter, commodity charge of $2.92 per 1,000 gallons. For large commercial industrial, the customer charge is $973.84 per quarter, and the commodity charge is $2.35 per 1,000 gallons. Under Schedule 4, sewer charges in city rates, residential and small commercial, There's a minimum charge of $55.45 per quarter and a commodity charge of $8.31 per 1,000 gallons. For commercial, it's a customer charge of $1,047.42 per quarter and a commodity charge of $4.84 per 1,000 gallons. For large commercial industrial, it's a customer charge of $1,615.69 per quarter and a commodity charge of $3.87 per 1,000 gallons. Under Schedule 5, sewer charges outside city rates, residential and small commercial, there's a minimum charge of $110.91 per quarter and a commodity charge of $16.64 per 1,000 gallons. For commercial, it's customer charge of $2,094.82 per quarter and a commodity charge of $9.65 per 1,000 gallons. For large commercial industrial, the customer charge is $3,231.39 per quarter, and the commodity charge is $7.76 per 1,000 gallons. Under Schedule 6 for sewer charges, Warwick Community College and Urban Service District rates, the residential and small commercial minimum charge $83.18 per quarter, commodity charge of $12.48 per 1,000 gallons. The commercial customer charge is $1,571.12 per quarter, and the commodity charge is $7.23 per 1,000 gallons. For large commercial industrial, customer charge is $2,423.53 per quarter, and the commodity charge is $5.83 per 1,000 gallons. For Schedule 7, sewer charges, sewer-only customers, it's for 1 to 2 fixtures, there is an in-city rate of $70.92. For quarterly outside city rates, there for 1 to 2 fixtures, it is $141.84. And for the quarterly urban service district rate is $106.38 for 1 to 2 fixtures. For 3 to 5 fixtures, the quarterly in-city rate is $106.38. The quarterly outside rate is $212.77, and the quarterly urban service district rate is $159.57. For 6 to 20 fixtures, the in-city rate is $152.90. The outside city rate is $305.79. And the urban service district rate is $229.34. For every 5 fixtures over 20, there is a charge in-city rate of $63.05, outside city rate of $126.09, and an urban service district rate of $94.57. Under Schedule 8 for commercial and industrial activities, for each fire service, the in-city rate is $373, and the outside city rate is $746. For each standby operational service, the in-city rate is $373, and the outside city rate is $746. Residential and small commercial customers have an average water utilization of less than 300,000 gallons in a quarter. Commercial customers have an average water utilization of 300,000 to 600,000 gallons per quarter, and large commercial industrial have an average water utilization of over 600,000 gallons per quarter. Average water utilization per quarter, this is based on the annual consumption divided by 4 to get the average quarterly utilization. For calculation of bills for residential and small customers, the minimum charge for both water and sewer will apply if water service is turned on at the water meter and usage is 0 to 6,000 gallons per quarter. Only the city can turn a meter on and off. For usage of 7,000 gallons and above, the commodity charge will be applied for each 1,000 gallons used, and the minimum charge will not be applied. For commercial and large commercial industrial customers, every quarterly bill will receive a customer charge for both water and sewer. Then for each 1,000 gallons used, the appropriate commodity charge will be applied.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. At this time, I will open the public hearing. Anyone who wishes to speak, please identify yourself. Ms. Glanz, anyone?
I'm not seeing anybody in the chat or on the camera.
Okay.
Could I ask a question? This is Brett Hopkins speaking. Is this where I can drop you a file regarding rent increases? Is that what we're talking about now? I kind of lost the bubble on what the agenda is and how it's laying out.
This is a discussion on the water and sewer rates for 2000.
Okay. Okay, good. Thanks.
Okay. Hearing no comments or requests to speak, I will close that public hearing on ordinance number 2594. At this time, I'll ask Mr. Tillman to present ordinance number 2595.
Right, ordinance number 2595 is an ordinance of the City of Salisbury, Maryland, to set fees for FY 2021 and thereafter unless and until subsequently revised or changed. Whereas the fees charged by the city are reviewed and then revised in accordance with the adoption of the fiscal year 2021 budget of the City of Salisbury. And whereas the fees listed in the attached FY 2021 fee schedule Exhibit 1 are an attempt to identify and list all fees, some of which are revised in accordance with the adoption of fiscal year 2021 budget of the City of Salisbury. And whereas some of the fees may have been inadvertently omitted from the schedule, any existing fees not listed in the attached FY 2021 fee schedule shall remain as currently set forth in the Salisbury Municipal Code. Be it further ordained and enacted by the Council of the City of Salisbury that the fee amounts included in the attached Exhibit 1 FY 2021 fee schedule shall be adopted by the City of Salisbury, and the amount set forth herein shall supersede the corresponding fee amounts prescribed in the Salisbury Municipal Code until one or more of the said fees are subsequently amended.
Thank you, Mr. Tillman. At this time, I'll open the public hearing on ordinance number 2595. Anyone who wishes to speak, please identify yourself so you can be.
Again, Jack, I'm not seeing anybody in the chat or on screen.
Okay. Seeing that there's no one that wishes to speak, I will close that public hearing. At this time, I'll ask Mr. Tillman to present the overview of the constant yield tax rate.
Okay, the City of Salisbury proposes to increase real property taxes. For the tax year beginning July 1st, 2020, the estimated real property assessable base will increase by 3.46% from $1,938,872,013 to $2,006,004,949. If the City of Salisbury maintains the current tax rate of $0.9832 per $100 of assessment, the real property tax revenues will increase by 3.46%, resulting in $660,051 of new real property tax revenues. In order to fully offset the effect of increasing assessments, the real property tax rate should be reduced to $0.9503, the constant yield tax rate. The City of Salisbury is considering not reducing its real property tax rate enough to fully offset the increasing assessments. The city proposes to adopt a real property tax rate of $0.9832 per $100 of assessment. This tax rate is 3.46% higher than the constant yield tax rate and will generate $660,051 in additional property tax revenues. Public hearing on the proposed property tax rate was advertised for this evening, May 18th, 2019, to occur by Zoom.
Thank you, Mr. Tillman. I will now open the public hearing, and I would ask anybody that wants to speak regarding this matter to identify yourself and be sworn in by Ms. Nichols.
No one has typed anything in the chat. I'm not seeing anybody on screen.
Thank you, Ms. Glantz. Seeing that no one wants to speak on this topic, I will close the public hearing. I would also remind everyone that the second reading and vote for budget fees and water and sewer rates will be held on 5/26/2020 at the legislative session at 6 p.m. on Zoom. Do we have any public comments, Ms. Glantz?
We don't. Mr. Hopkins shared with me his, for another matter, but it's in the chat to me, so I'll just share it, the Anne Arundel County proposal. So I will share that with all of council after this meeting.
Great, appreciate it. Thank you very much. If there's no further action, this special meeting of the Salisbury City Council is adjourned. I'd like to welcome everyone to the work session of the Salisbury City Council on May 18th. We have several items on the agenda, and we will try to get through them as expeditiously as possible and still be answering any questions that we might have. First up on the agenda is an ordinance to reallocate funds from the city's capital project fund to provide additional money for the zoo administration project. Field Operations Director Tom Stevenson will talk about this. Tom?
Hey, Andy, are you able to talk on this one? Doesn't look like Tom's on. Or is, wait 1 second.
Hello. Don't pay attention.
I won't ask.
I would not.
Go ahead.
I'm just gathering. I'm gonna need a quick second to grab that piece. Hold on 1 second. I'm pulling up the items.
Do you need me to grab something from your office?
We'll give you a sec. We'll give you a second. We'll jump to Mrs. Miller on the budget amendment.
Okay.
For the electrical repairs and upgrade.
Okay.
Ms. Miller, are you there?
I sure am.
I knew you would be. Go right ahead.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So I'm requesting a budget amendment to cover some unforeseen work that has arisen at the government office building. So in the basement of the government office building, it's a transformer room. I think I sent you guys some pictures, and they were looking to repair a fan down there because it gets so very hot and overheated in that room. Well, when Delmarva Power went down there to look at the transformers and whatnot, they really recommended that the transformers be pulled out of the building, be placed somewhere else. It's really a safety issue to even have these transformers down there. I think I alluded to it in the memo, but the work to move the transformers is costly. Now, Delmarva Power is paying for I believe the transformers. I mentioned it on the email. Yeah, they'll cover the cost of the new transformers and the installation, but we pay for connecting the new transformers to the building. The total amount of the work was about $98,000. That was the first quote we had seen. That was from Carter's Electrical. It's a local company. And then putting some in for contingency as well. So all in, we were looking at about $110,000. That cost would be split between the city and the county.
So we're looking at about 55 grand.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, I'm surprised that the transformers were in the basement. That's, yeah. Anyway. Okay, council, any questions or comments? Mr. Boda?
No, I think this is absolutely a priority.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Jackson?
No questions at all.
Thank you. Ms. Blake?
No questions.
Mrs. Gregory?
No questions.
And I've given my statement already, so I believe we have consensus to move this forward. Mr. Boda,
Yes.
Ms. Jackson,
Yes.
Ms. Blake,
Yes.
Mrs. Gregory.
Yes.
All right, we're going to move it forward. Thank you, Mrs. Miller.
Thank you very much.
Andy, you ready to go?
I am, and Ben Baker's on here too. So both of us will tag team this first item. The ordinance to reallocate funds for the city capital project for the zoo administrative project admin building. We are in dire need of upgrading that space. It's been on its last legs for a few years now. We allocated $100,000 in this past year's budget. FY20, after doing the site assessment, that will get us most of the way, but we realized to do it right, we needed to allocate some additional funding. We thought that number might have been 180, but we've been able to carve it out, look at it strategically with doing some things in-house. And we actually don't have to relocate it, which we thought was going to be the premium cost. So we can put it right in the same place, but an extra $40,000, which we have available in bond pool reallocations, would get us the 140, which would give us enough money to do all the things we need. As I said, Deputy Director Ben Baker is also on the line if you'd like to add anything.
Ben, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, this would be good, and hopefully we can start moving forward with some RFQs on it.
Okay. Questions or comments from the council, Mr. Boda?
Not at this time.
Ms. Jackson?
No.
Ms. Blake?
I have no questions.
Ms. Gregory?
No questions.
One question, just for clarity. Is this project going to take care of both where the old two offices were? Weren't they two? There were two that were put together.
That's actually the unit. It's like a trailer.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna have the people relocate being and take that one down, and then have the other one installed.
Will we have any more space in there?
It's pretty much going to be the same type of building.
Gotcha.
Office trailer.
With a floor that doesn't
Yes,
wobble.
that'd be a plus.
I like that. Okay. Do we have consensus, Mr. Boda?
Yes.
Ms. Jackson?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Blake?
Yes.
Mrs. Gregory?
Yes.
All right, we'll move it forward. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
Yep.
Next up on the agenda is an ordinance, public safety tax credit, City Administrator Julia Glanz, and Police Chief Barbara Duncan, and Fire Chief John Tull. Julia, you gonna handle the main piece?
Yeah, we did skip Debbie for CDBG. I know we're all out of order tonight.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So
I'm sorry.
I'll yield my time if that's okay.
Okay. Fine. I'm sorry, Debbie. Next up is the CDBG revisions to the City Citizen Participation Plan. So we have Grants Manager Deborah Stam. Debbie, good evening.
Good evening. Okay, so as I'm sure everyone is aware, as the City of Salisbury is an entitlement jurisdiction, we receive funds annually directly from HUD. And one of the elements we have to include in the city's consolidated plan is a citizen participation plan. And it talks about all the different ways that we encourage the public to participate in the process when we develop the consolidated plan every 5 years or the action plan each year. Now, this year, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, HUD has issued certain plan amendment waivers and CARES Act CDBG flexibilities, which allow for alternate virtual public hearing platforms and expedited public comment periods during disasters and/or emergencies. And as a result, all entitlement jurisdictions are now being required to update their citizen participation plans to include these new elements. So I drafted a revised, updated citizen participation plan, which not only included the new emergency elements, but I also expanded a few of the other sections. The original participation plan was done way back in 2004 by the original consultant. And so it was very streamlined. It had all the necessary elements, but it didn't have a whole lot of detail to it. So at the same time as we were adding these emergency elements, I went ahead and fleshed out some of the other sections to provide additional clarity. I added some information on the environmental review process and the public comments associated with that, which is something we've always done, but it just wasn't mentioned previously. So we've just kind of gone ahead and expanded everything and provided some additional language for clarity. And now we just need to get it adopted so that we can have expedited public comment periods for the COVID funds.
Great. Debbie, I want to commend you on the way that the document was edited. It was very easy to follow. Really, it was very easy to follow. I could see it took a lot of work, and thank you for that.
Well, the red line version, actually, I can't take credit for that. That was done by Christine Devine at Legal. Mine was all yellow highlighted.
Oh, good. I appreciate it. Mark, would you please tell Christine, thank you for the way she did it. It was very easy to follow.
I'll be happy to convey that message.
Great. Comments or questions from the council? Mr. Boda?
Jack, you expressed my thoughts as well. It was straightforward and really easy to read, and so that's a good job. Thank you, and I support moving this forward.
Good. We'll kill two birds with one stone. Ms. Jackson, comments?
How about killing three? I'm with you.
Okay. Ms. Blake?
No comments. It was great work.
Thank you. Mrs. Gregory?
Just good job. Looks great. I'm on board.
Okay. And we have consensus. Debbie, we're going to proceed. It will be on the agenda. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Now, let's see. Make sure I don't skip anything. Now we're on ordinance public safety tax credit. Ms. Glantz, you're up.
Good evening, Council. So before you is a piece of legislation that would enable us to give a tax credit to police officers, career firefighters, and volunteer firefighters. And I'll turn it over to John in a minute for the details, but we're really excited about this. This is something that we've been thinking about for a long time in anticipation of dealing with the challenge that comes along with recruiting volunteer firefighters. This could be an incentive. And then COVID-19 happened, and this just expedited the need to take care of those on the front line in another way. So we're really excited about it, and I'll let John take it from here with the details.
Chief, good evening.
Good evening. How is everyone?
Fine, thank you.
As Julia said, this has been a issue that we have been looking at for some time. One of the things that we wanted to accomplish was to recognize those public safety personnel to, one, live in the city that they work in, and then to provide this type of incentive. So a lot of research went into this. We've looked at every jurisdiction in Maryland, from PG County to Montgomery County to Anne Arundel to Frederick, and they all have very similar plans that is before you right now. So with this, there are some stipulations to qualify. Public safety officials must use the city property as their principal residence. They must be employed full-time as a member of the fire or police department, or serve as an active volunteer fire department or volunteer firefighter. There are some conditions that it goes up to $2,500. And you can see by the scale that it is an escalating scale. So over several years before they get the full benefit of this property tax credit. The big initiative for us is that one is just an important tool in recognizing all the first responders. And it is a valuable recruitment and retention tool for our volunteers.
Okay. Questions or comments? We're going to do is Chief Duncan on? Julia?
He isn't, but I know the mayor had one thing I think he wanted to add.
All right, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President. There's actually a couple things I'd like to add. First and foremost, I want to say that this, as Julia said, is something that we've been considering for some time. The challenges in recruiting volunteer firefighters, particularly in our own backyard. You all know the challenges of recruiting police officers, and we've been blessed that we haven't been hit with a challenge in recruiting career firefighters lately, but that certainly could exist in the future, and I believe has existed at times in the past. So this is just one more acknowledgement of the service that our public safety officials provide to our citizens. It's also an acknowledgement, a tacit acknowledgement that recruiting from our own ranks, when recruiting, from people who already live in Salisbury, is advantageous to us. And an acknowledgement that when a police officer or a firefighter lives in a neighborhood, it's a stabilizing feature. It adds one more person with a good long-term career, with a good income, an income that we always want to increase and improve, I'm sure, but with a good income in a neighborhood, and somebody who is either a law enforcement official or somebody who is an emergency medical expert in a neighborhood. And that in itself is a positive attribute for any community. So we look at this as something that's important at any time. That being said, the reason why this was included in today's announcement as part of the Next Step plan is recognizing that we want to do everything we can to acknowledge the additional risk that our first responders are facing at this moment. And while this is not the only thing that we're doing, it is one of the things that we think is important to do in acknowledgement of a lack of other resources to do more for them in saying thank you for the service provided. So I think Chief did a great job explaining the work that he's put into this. Oh, and there's one thing I'd add is that under 3.24030B, C, has received a service-related disability, retired from the job in good standing, or served as a volunteer member for more than 20 years. So in other words, retirees in good standing would continue to receive the benefit. I think that's important to note that it doesn't just stop when they leave service. So otherwise, thank you. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Questions or comments from the council? Mr. Boda?
I think the mayor expressed my opinions and position on this issue. I think this is another tool in our toolbox for recruitment, and also a great way to appreciate those on the front lines in not just this crisis, but on a day-to-day basis. They're the face of the city, and they often face situations that are tough. And this is another way to say thank you. So I support this.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson.
Yes, it's a great incentive for our public service, public safety, and a great reward for their services. So I'm all for it.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Ms. Blake?
Absolutely. I'm on board.
Thank you. This is Gregory.
Of course, I'm absolutely behind this. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor and Chief and Chief Duncan, you know how much I appreciate this kind of an ordinance. The best part about it, to be honest, I mean, guys want to be firemen. There's a certain thing that's there that make them want to do it. But I think the benefit that I see to it is when you have someone who's a neighbor of yours, who's a fireman, who's an EMS person, who's a policeman, there's a sense of security that comes along with that I think is worth a tremendous amount. And I fully support this, and based on the comments of the council, we're going to move it forward. So thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Julia. Okay, let me get back to my top here. All right, next up we have a Vision Zero plan presentation. Department of Infrastructure and Development, Director Amanda Pollock, and Project Specialist Will White. Amanda, good evening.
Good evening, everyone. We are pleased tonight to be able to present the Vision Zero action plan to you all. It's been about a year since we last met and talked about Vision Zero, which is an initiative to make our city streets safer. So in that time, since we presented to you about a year ago, we've been working with a task force and developing this action plan that has definitive things that we can do to help improve safety on our city streets. So Will White is the city's transportation project specialist, and he's going to run down some of the action items. And I also wanted to mention that we have many members of our bicycle and pedestrian advisory committee available also tonight for questions and comments. They have discussed the plan numerous times at their meetings as well. So I'll turn it over to Will.
Thank you, and good evening.
Good evening, Will. How are you?
Good, good. Hope everyone's well. I will pull this plan up. Hope I can share my screen here. Can everyone see the plan?
Yeah.
Okay. I won't go through the whole plan page by page in the interest of time. We'll be posting it online after the meeting. So it'll be available for everyone, including the public, to see, but I'll hit the core data and then some of the action items that will kind of guide us over the next 5 fiscal years. So going through the plan, obviously it's set up like any of our other master plans, defining what it is. But the core of the plan and what matters to us is the fundamental principles. Everything this defines everything that sets up the action items. Big one being that, we're just not going to accept traffic deaths and severe injuries anymore, not when they're preventable. And then through months of working with MDOT's Maryland Department of Transportation's Raven team, which is a geographic information team based out of Washington College, we were able to compile all the crash data and get what you see here and what the entire plan is based on. So we have about 128, almost 129 miles of paved streets that we maintain that belong to us and not either the state or SU or another entity. We have a grand total of 3,456 crashes over the course of 2015 to 2018. Of those, a little over half are on streets that actually belong to us that we can control. The most of those crashes are obviously minor crashes, which we would call fender benders or rear end collisions. While we want to eliminate all crashes, or as much as we can, the primary core that we're going to focus on are the fatal and serious vehicular crashes, of which there were 26, and then crashes involving people walking or biking, and 98. There's 98 of those that are separate from other counts. We have a breakdown of those severe injury vehicle crashes, what vehicles they were in, crashes of severe and fatal consequences that involve the vulnerable users. So that's, bikes and pedestrians, as well as the 2 fatal car collisions and the serious injury crashes in automobiles, which were 24. And then just an overall view of what's what. So in the city total, we had 84 pedestrian crashes, 53 on city streets, so over half, 51 bike crashes, the vast majority of which were on our streets, 45 of those. We had 8 fatal crashes in the city during that time period, 2 on our streets, and then 53 crashes with serious injury, of which almost half, 24, belong to us. We'll kind of move through this. We defined a high injury network. So in long story short, the vast majority of crashes anywhere in the country happen on a select number of streets. They tend not to occur everywhere. They're concentrated. In our case, our fatal and severe crashes occur on 2% of our streets. And here they are. Here they are in typed out. So sometimes that map can be a little hard to see. So for pedestrians, it's West Carroll, West College, East Main Street, West Main Street, and South Boulevard. For cyclists, it's West Isabella Street, West Main Street, and East Church Street. That same map or those same streets in visual form. High injury network. These are the top streets with serious injury crashes, and that's Eastern Shore Drive and East Church Street. And then top city streets with fatal crashes, again, Eastern Shore Drive and Naylor Mill Road. There it is in visual form. And then here's our intersection crashes. I won't go through all of them, but you will notice some of them are familiar to us and we are working on them currently, i.e. Mill Street at Riverside Drive, which is a major one and appears multiple times on the list, as does Eastern Shore Drive and Naylor Mill Road. And there they are. So of all types of crashes, East Church Street, Mill Street, and Camden. Most of Mill Street pops on this list mostly because of smaller collisions, fender benders and rear end collisions at the series of lights there. And then of course DUI citations, which we compiled the data. We're still working on a plan to deal with a lot of that, but it's those 21 corridors also mostly overlap with both the high injury network and the low to moderate income neighborhoods. Timing of crashes, 3 o'clock to 4 p.m. on Friday afternoon is the big one. Most of our high injury networks also occur in communities of concern. Those are our low to moderate income districts in the city. These shaded blocks that you see are actually our community development block grant target areas. So the vast majority of our crashes are happening in or bordering along neighborhoods that have historically been disinvested. And then going into the action items. So we set up the action items into 5 categories. They are based around, or 5 goals. These are all the action items support accomplishing these 5 goals. Reduce speeds to safe levels, eliminate fatal crashes on the high injury network, reducing occurrences of all crashes on city streets by 50% by the year 2030. So that's a 5% reduction per year. The reduced vehicle miles traveled by 15% by 2030. That's 1.5% each year over the 10 years. And then educate the public and expand the understanding that speed is the leading factor in fatal crashes. Little blurb for our partners here. And then going into the action plan, they're arranged by those goals, which they primarily support. And I won't go through each of them because some of them is stuff we're already doing, but I'll kind of hit on some of our new ones that you'll be seeing. Context-based speed limit analysis will be looking at the context of streets to set speed limits or reset speed limits in some cases. So streets in the urban area just don't need a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit, whereas that might be appropriate for Naylor Mill to have a 40-mile-per-hour speed limit. Speed awareness and safety program. This is getting the driver feedback signs out there. A slow zone program, setting much lower speed limits in areas where there's either a lot of pedestrians or users of the network that could be unpredictable, i.e. children would be present, so schools, parks, etc. Eliminating fatalities on the high injury network. A lot of these are studies and modifications to existing intersections. You've already seen some of these around the park in Salisbury, High Street, North Division, amongst other places. Installing street lights on high injury network streets to increase lighting at night where a lot of crashes are concentrated. Study for the expansion of the hike and bike system to Naylor Mill Road. Naylor Mill Road corridor study. You'll see that because it's a street with a fatal and serious injury. There's a lot of concentration on it in here. Execution of the Eastern Shore Visioning Study, which is something we worked on a few years back. We want to start pushing that forward as that was also a severe injury and fatal corridor. Improvements to Camden Avenue and College Avenue. For obvious reasons, not only are they both on the high injury network, but they have a lot of pedestrians and cyclist presence. Some standard striping and signage maintenance, try to get a revolving program on that. Reducing the overall crashes and eliminating serious fatal crashes. Expansion, more marked crosswalks, getting traffic signal replacement warrant analysis program where we would determine if signals that are scheduled for replacement anyway are still needed. because if not, if they don't meet what's called a warrant, they can actually cause more crashes than they would eliminate. Hence why we removed the one at Circle and Division and then the main Division. And a shout out to SU. I will say they have some items in here their own that they've volunteered to take the lead on. They are taking the lead on improvements to Dogwood and Wesley Drive. Those streets are currently not in the city, but they will be when they annex into Court Plaza. So they're taking the lead on that one. Development of a roundabout policy and program. Roundabouts do have drastic safety increases, so that's why we tend to favor them. And so the installation of PED signals at all new or existing signals. Sadly, most of our traffic signals don't have any pedestrian facilities whatsoever. Upgrading the visibility of those traffic signals. We're working on getting the GIS viewer and for internal use, as well as one for external use for the public, set up on for the Vision Zero campaign. SU is taking the lead on a crosswalk campaign to educate students on the use of crosswalks and why they should. Reduction of vehicle miles traveled and providing new alternatives. A lot of this is stuff that we have been focusing on over the years, including the execution of the rail trail and urban greenway master plans. Bike share implementation, which is nearing. Continued execution of the bicycle network master plan. BPAC has volunteered and stepped up and agreed to increase its presence and outreach and get out into the community and help with education incentives. Continuing upgrade of ADA facilities. Transit expansion and aid services, such as mobility as a service, which would combine multiple transit entities into one payment system, making it a lot easier to use. A long-range transportation plan for the city. Currently, the Salisbury-Wycomico Metropolitan Planning Organization does these, but they're intentionally vague, leaving as much power to the jurisdictions as possible. We would take that study and get very specific with it. And then lastly, the expansion of education and understanding. Fire department and police department have stepped up big in this category along with BPAC, and they're looking to expand their teaching in the junior fire academy and their SPD's mentor programs, and teach children about traffic safety and safe use of the sidewalks, and the dangers and benefits of being outside and walking to school, et cetera, et cetera. SUPD has also stepped up. They're going to be reaching out to university students. HCDD is volunteering to help with more distribution of Vision Zero materials and setting up more pop-up events during their neighborhood walks. And that is it. So I will stop sharing, and that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Will. Questions from the council, Mr. Boda?
Will, first, thank you for your work on this. You all have done a great job with this. I fully support the Vision Zero plan. I would recommend maybe take a look at the light on Priscilla and Church. I think that one could probably be converted to a four-way stop, but that's just a suggestion. I'll let the experts look at that. No, just overall, great job, and I support moving this forward.
Thank you, Mr. Boda. Ms. Jackson?
Yes, William, I really appreciate this. And what I did like is where you're gonna take the time to teach the kids about the crosswalks and road safety, because they do need to understand how safe it is, because I tell them all the time about walking in the crosswalks and they don't understand that. And I let them know that that's where their safeguard is, because if they're out of that crosswalk, then if someone hits them, they're not really responsible, not unless they're speeding. And I tell them that all the time over here where I live at. So I thank you for that, because they need to be educated. A lot of people, even the adults, need to be educated on that behalf. Thank you. And I do support.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Blake?
I read this earlier today. What an outstanding presentation, and well done, William. I thought it was excellent. It's a wonderful outlay for this project, and I'm all for it.
Thank you, Angela. Mrs. Gregory?
I just want to thank you for the time you put into this. You obviously spent a lot of time and effort putting this in such a great format. It's very easy to understand, and I really appreciate that. And I support it.
Thank you. Will, I have a couple of questions if I could.
Yes, sir.
The numbers in terms of injury and fatalities that you mentioned, does that include 13 south of Salisbury Boulevard?
So they're not included in the city numbers. They're in that overall factor. That's why we broke out the city data. MDOT is assisting us with the plan, and they're a notable partner. They are, however, transitioning themselves through they're going from the towards zero death and moving towards actually Vision Zero themselves. And as such, as we're writing our plan, they're in a weird flux. So they weren't able to contribute directly to the plan, but they are on board with us. So they're working on their end to solve their fatalities on their streets. But as always, we'll continue working closely with them.
That was my second question. My third question still has something to do with 13. Mm-hmm. The control of the lights on 13.
Yes.
State controlled?
Correct.
So I'll give you an example today that drove me crazy. I'm coming back from the news conference this morning from the government office building, and I get to 13, and I'm going to make a right-hand turn. And behind me was a cement truck. Now, we had a red light. The man tooted his horn at me for the entire length of that red light. Because I felt like getting out and saying, if you look coming from north, if you look on 13, you can't see cars coming in the inside lane.
Right.
And so would we make recommendations to 13? They put a no turn on red at that point. Would that be something this committee would do? Or how would we go about that?
Yes. So we can do that. And that's actually, we have a process. There's already an existing process for us to do and a mechanism. That is something we can do. State Highway will take time to implement it because they'll study that they'll go through a whole process, including a warrant analysis and various other calculations to make sure they can handle it. That said, that whole corridor from roughly Church Street through Vine Street is slated for pedestrian improvements. And they have a master study on that corridor, which will A, expedite it, but B, kind of trend towards the way of giving less time and space to cars and more towards pedestrians. So in that stretch, at least, they'd probably be very willing to consider a no right turn on red there.
Good. Thank you, Will. I appreciate it. That's all the questions I have. So we have, and I too, the document is fantastic. And I'm curious to see how it's going to progress, and I hope that the state MDOT gets together, and because I think that through synergies that we have with them, we can go a lot further.
Oh, absolutely.
Do you know the numbers of the injuries on 13 by any chance, or no?
I don't know specifically to 13. I've seen some of the reports. I can't recall off the top of my head. They do know exactly. Most of them are concentrated where you think they were, especially around the S curve, and that they a bunch of countermeasures in stages to deal with that. It takes time to move through their very large bureaucracy. So they're aware of the issue they're working in.
Thank you, Will. Appreciate it very much. Thank you, Amanda.
Mr. President, Sandy Pope, who is a member of BPAC, asked to share a few words if you'll allow him.
Absolutely. Unmute him.
I'm unmuted. Thank you all. I'm here as the co-chair of the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee. And as Will said in his presentation, our group is very excited about the Vision Zero action plan. We see lots of opportunities for our committee to be involved, particularly, Ms. Jackson, to your point, in the education and outreach components. And we've been doing some of that, but it's really nice to have kind of this sort of guidance and strategic document to support it. So I just wanted to echo everything that Will said and let you all know that we are a group that's really looking forward to helping implement some of these ideas.
Thank you very much for your comments. Appreciate it.
Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Can I offer some brief remarks?
Absolutely.
So just a couple thoughts. First, I would be remiss to not take the opportunity to embarrass Will for a moment. If it's not obvious, he is in what looks to be a delightful Army barrack. Will is currently wearing 2 hats. I believe he is serving on state active duty as a member of the Maryland Army National Guard, 1st the 175th Infantry, and also serving right at this moment as the transportation specialist for the city of Salisbury. So a twofer for all of us, citizens. So Will, thank you, and to BPAC, thank you, and Amanda, your team has continued to do great things for this community. And I think what I'm amazed by is the number of requests that I receive from people for addressing speeds in their neighborhoods, that we can point to more speed reduction engineering solutions in the last 3 to 4 years than in the entirety of our city before now. Much of the physical improvements at intersections in terms of pedestrian safety, cyclist safety, and speed reduction, as well as protection of those from free right turns, is in the form of an engineering solution. That's what's been invested in over the last few years, rather than prioritizing speed over safety. So I just want to commend the team for that. Still, I receive many requests from people to address speed in their neighborhoods. And interestingly, many of the streets that were highlighted tonight are the very streets where people are expressing the highest level of concern. Camden Avenue, Carroll Street, and one of the streets where we used to receive speed complaints, Waverly Drive, a street that has its own high record of crashes prior to the improvements made a few years ago. Now that being said, we get our own special concerns about the way we've done it, but this is the nature of slowing down traffic. That engineering produces the best results, and then education, and then enforcement. All 3 are important, but you cannot beat physically causing people to want to drive slower. Street design always sends a signal on how people should drive, and the new and improved forthcoming Carroll Street will address not only the fatalities of hospital personnel that we've seen crossing Carroll Street trying to get to downtown, but also will address the speedway that is Carroll Street today, because the message is being sent: you can drive 60 miles per hour down this street, when the fact is you should drive 25 or 30. I also want to address Main Street. One of the streets, 2 of the streets included in Will's list of streets that present particular problems are East Main and West Main, both of which are receiving bike facilities, narrower streets, bump outs, and removal of signals that don't protect safety. And lastly, I thought I'd point out the just some inside information on the S-curve on things that are being discussed, so that the city and the hospital agree completely now. Maybe we have before, but now it's official, that the S-curve should be straightened. The hospital and the city want to work in tandem, and State Highway agrees with us too. All 3 entities are in total agreement that the S-curve should be straightened. There are some property acquisitions, there's some realignment of utilities, there's some very expensive things that have to happen before that can come to fruition. But over the next few years, I think we will work slowly to develop a plan to make that happen. That will be a combination of responsibilities from the city, the hospital itself, the property owners in that area, and the state. But I think the result will be acknowledging that that point should not cause people's death. And I believe we had 2 fatalities in a very short period of time. Was that last year, Will, or in the last year and a half?
Yes, we actually had 2 fatalities short, probably not even 6 months apart. They were both on 13 and they were both at the S curve, which SHA is aware of, and they, obviously their engineering part of their immediate solution is based around that and what caused that incident.
So, while they're under a major restructuring of that portion of the highway for stormwater purposes today, we hope that it will happen again for realignment purposes within a few years from now. Thank you, Mr. Heath, and thank you, Council, for letting me be heard on this. And thank you to BPAC for everything that you're doing on this subject and others.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To your point, several months ago, I think we talked about it. My grandson, who's a sophomore at SU, called me one day and said he has to write a paper and a proposal on legislation for the city. And he chose slowing the speed down on Camden Avenue by the university. And I think he was trying to pick my brain. And I said, no, you do it and see what happens. He submitted it to the professor and he hasn't gotten it back yet, but when he does, I'm bringing it to you, Mr. Mayor. And, but he's just one of the few because I agree with you. I bet you I've gotten 3 or 4 actually in my own development where the speed limit, believe it or not, is 35 miles an hour. Well, you've been in my development. There's no way that should be 35 miles an hour. But anyway, so keep up the good work. Will, thank you for your service. Thank you for what you're doing now. BPAC, thank you very much. And we're looking forward to moving this forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Last item on the agenda this evening is ordinance for rent increase freeze during an emergency. And we, Julia, I think you're handling that.
Yeah, I'll start things off if that's okay. And then
Okay.
I'm sure the mayor will jump in as well. So on March 5th, the governor declared a state of emergency, which comes into play later on with our timing on many of the pieces of policy and legislation that we're putting forward with his, no late fees being allowed in a certain period of time while we're in a state of emergency. So we modeled this piece of legislation similar to that. We're worried about the most vulnerable in our population, in our community. We know that based off census tract data and housing data, we've got a lot of low-income renters, and we want to make sure that they don't have to worry about if they are laid off and miss a rent payment, and have to worry about that nagging worry of rental increases. That's not going to create a safe and healthy environment for them and their family. We know there's a huge mental health crisis looming that is on the horizon, and this is a way to sort of help with that in a very small way to hopefully reduce one more worry that they have in this crazy time we're all in. So this piece of legislation will bar rental increases during the state of emergency and for 90 days thereafter. It also requires that landlords notify their tenants of any previous rent increases that were made in the time period since March 5th and reimburse those or prorate their next bill, and that late fees are not permissible in this time frame. And finally, the largest chunk of this is that landlords are going to have to work with their tenants on a payment plan for 12 months after the state of emergency is lifted, because we know that just because the state of emergency is gone, or one sector is back to normal, that there are some pretty heavy burdens, financial burdens that many folks are dealing with. So it's going to be, it was a steep decline to get where we are, but it's going to be a slow incline to get back up to some sort of normal. So that is the gist of it. And public housing properties are not included in this because they're governed by federal laws. So I will yield to the mayor at this point.
Mr. Mayor?
Good evening. All right, so what I'd like to do is explain some of the origins and some of the things included in the associated emergency order and the purposes of this. So we recognize that, you know, it is sometimes said that you know, broad policy doesn't make sense in the face of, you know, a few bad actors. I think this is narrow policy that will only affect bad actors. So those who seek to exploit people in their worst moments will be affected, and those who would never need not worry. I do think that, as I've shared with each of the 5 of you council members, I do believe that there will be a sense of fear that this is indicative of city consideration of long-term rent control. I want to be clear, and I'm sure I'm not alone, that as a person who voted against rent control proposed for our city, I think it is apples and oranges, particularly because at a time not in crisis, we have seen a city such as ours with 1.84% vacancy in housing, when healthy communities have over 15% vacancy in housing. That a lack of supply and growing demand as the fastest growing city in Maryland has meant that prices remain relatively high. However, we are incomparable to places like Montgomery County, San Jose, and San Francisco, and New York City, where rent control exists and I think is justified. That is not what this bill does. This bill simply recognizes that at a time of unprecedented crisis, that anyone who would exploit people and not only just exploit them for money, but also attempt to remove them illegally from their home, that this is a time in which we are obligated as the government entity closest to the people, a municipality, to protect our citizens. So what this legislation does is it prohibits the increase of rent during the governor's state of emergency. It requires that any increase thus far affected since the beginning of the state of emergency be refunded. It also does bar the imposition of late fees and requires the negotiation of payment plans, recognizing that those negotiations must be offered to all people under fair housing, as was discussed by Mr. Hopkins earlier tonight. What this also does is it provides for tenants the notification by the city, but through the landlords of all tenants in the city of Salisbury, that it is their right to not leave their home or apartment, their house or their apartment, until removed by a court. Now, again, there is no lawful way to remove someone, but as we have evidenced, we have more than 40 instances so far of people being illegally removed from their home in the city of Salisbury since the start of the COVID-19 crisis. We have seen everything from innocent notifications that your lease has come to an end and thus you must leave, we're coming to change the locks, to your lease was month to month, you are late and haven't provided a payment, we're coming to clean on Friday, make sure all of your belongings are outside, to hey, we are scared you have bed bugs, we need you to be out of your apartment, and at your expense you must get a hotel room, and then only to find 3 days later when they come back the locks have been changed. For anyone to suggest that any of those examples are defensible, and for anyone to suggest that we should not provide protection for the tenants in those instances is, I believe, indefensible. This is not a suggestion that everyone is behaving like this. But laws are not made because everyone would break the law. Laws are made to protect people from the worst actors, those who are unscrupulous, those who would do wrong. And I think in this case, when we're talking about housing, which in the United States of America is generally and most often provided by the private sector, the removal of people from their housing units during this time would cause homelessness. And thus far, it has been on the backs of the taxpayers and on the backs of, particularly in our region, the city of Salisbury, for the entire lower shore, to address and work for the homeless population and to house the homeless population. I think it is critical that at this time we ensure that doesn't happen. I believe most of the people you and I know who are in the business of leasing property to people, most of the people who we have interacted with of late, tonight, in the last few days, would never even dream of it. But we know it's happening. We have evidence from people. We have their letters. I have personally spoken to landlords. I have made direct phone calls to landlords who have been caught doing this and asked them please to not. And in most cases, they say, I didn't know. I thought I could tell them to leave. I know I need a court order to force them, but I thought I could tell them to leave. Fine, but we also have a responsibility and a right to tell the tenants that they don't have to leave. Now, we want every business to be whole at the end of this. We want every business to survive it. That includes the rental industry, just as it would the restaurant industry or a gym or fitness center. There is no business that is exempt from our desire and my personal desire to survive this. However, we have to protect people, and we cannot stand idly by while people are being made homeless. So thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thank you for the opportunity to be heard on this. And I'll stand by in case there's a need for any more answers to questions or if you need me for any other comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Comments or questions from the council? Mr. Boda?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. And I think in this sense, I guess one question is are we setting this up as for all state of emergencies? Because sometimes we get situations where we have hurricanes, we have snowstorms, and we get shut down for a week. So will this apply to those?
Mr. Mayor?
As written, it would give us the authority to do that. However, extended states of emergency are not something we've ever experienced before. So in theory, worst case scenario, this would mean that during a hurricane for a week, rent couldn't be increased. I don't think that's likely to have a practical effect on anyone's business. But I would also certainly be willing to entertain, from my standpoint, entertain an adjustment if we wouldn't want it to have that effect. However, I would also suggest, even during a hurricane, we probably don't want people being removed from their properties, and we probably don't want people to see increased expenses for housing during that 1 week period of time or whatever it might be.
Okay, thank you. The other part is, and I've talked to a couple of different landlords and some other people. I think there also needs to be some education for tenants to communicate with your landlord, communicate with whoever you owe a bill to, whether it's the electric company, whether it's the water bill. There is some responsibility on those individuals. What are we able to include something in here for if a landlord has done everything they can to communicate with a tenant, and I know one particular that I've spoken to, a couple of tenants have not paid them for months. They've not communicated with them. The phone numbers don't work that they were given. And sometimes when they go by, nobody answers the door. So what are we doing on that end? Because if there's people who are taking advantage of the situation, on that end, are there some things that we can put into, also say, hey, if you're on that side of it, you have a responsibility to be a part of that process.
Sure, Mr. Vice President. I think the language speaks pretty clearly to that by authorizing what this legislation does is authorizes the mayor to issue an executive order, which is already written, that provides for notification, requires notification of every tenant. This particular executive order provides them notification of their right to remain. I will tell you that I'll write the letter personally that will be distributed, and it will be distributed at a penalty of 1 misdemeanor per failure to distribute. If you fail to provide this letter to your tenants, every tenant who you do not notify, that is in itself punishable as a misdemeanor. In other words, simply provide the notification. I will personally write the language. One of the things I'll include is this does not free you of any obligation under your contract with your landlord. None. You are under a contract, and when the courts reopen, you'll be held responsible for that contract and everything that comes with it. I don't expect that judges are simply going to, by and large, say, no, you don't have to pay those debts. I certainly believe that there will be some expectation that people pay those debts. What I can tell you is looking at other things that we're able to collect data on that people aren't paying, such as water bills. We have fewer than 5% of non-payers right now. That may or may not be true with rent. Now, that's in a situation where they don't have to pay their water bill at all. The governor has barred us from shutting off water and barred us from forcing collection of water bills. And rent is a different situation. Rent, they have more power right now to require payment. But what we want to make sure of is, again, that people are not being made homeless as a result of their failure to even communicate. Because you're absolutely right, Mira, that they should communicate. Tenants should communicate with their landlords, but the consequence should not be creating a new burden on the taxpayers of Salisbury by creating a homeless person.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you on that. I just, it's responsibility goes two ways in a contract and in those situations. And I just, that I think also, I think people should also know that, hey, if you can pay your bills, pay your bills. Don't not pay your bills, because at some point you're going to have to pay them. So anyway, I appreciate this, and I support this. Thank you.
I think we can add language to that in the notice that goes out to tenants.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Jackson?
I thought I heard Mir say something about educating the residents about paying their rent. And I also heard you say just a few minutes ago that people know that they have rent to pay. You have bills, pay them. As far as communication, I'll say this a million times. You should communicate with whoever you owe, but you must pay your bills. And I do know some people do not have the funds to do it, but whatever funds you have, if you have anything left, give it to your landlord. Communicate with your landlord. Some of these landlords are not as hard as we think they are. They need their money just as well as you need yours. But I do agree with the mayor with illegal evictions. I totally agree. I've had several phone calls from people who have stated that the landlord has wanted to terminate their lease because he's going to raise the rent. And I'm like, no, you don't have to go anywhere, because you have to go through the court system to be evicted. And that's an illegal eviction that landlord is doing. Now, my other question is for the mayor. The Next Step program, when will that hit our website for the rental assistance?
It's on.
It's already on?
Yep. Okay. It's at salisbury.md/nextstep.
Okay.
But the application process will be handled through Salisbury Neighborhood Housing Service, and theirs will not be up until later this week.
Okay, that's what I want to know, because I had a couple of people that just text me and wanted to know, and because they were watching today, I guess they saw it where we were talking about the next step, so they really wanted to know, how they go about it because they couldn't get on it. So now I can tell them it'll be like another week or so before they can apply. But I think what's going on and what you're doing, Mayor, with the Next Step program and with the illegal evictions, I think we're on the right track. And I totally agree.
Thank you, April.
You're welcome.
Ms. Blake?
I like the language in the ordinance. I think it's clear, and I think it protects the purposes of illegal evictions. And I think if you are a landlord who has been doing what they needed to be doing all along, this is not really going to impact you. This is just really to help some very vulnerable citizens at this time, and I'm for it.
Thank you, Ms. Blake. Mrs. Gregory?
I think we've pretty much covered it. I wholeheartedly support this. Housing is a human right. People deserve to have a home, and they don't. They shouldn't be made homeless because of something that is totally outside of their control. I think this is a step in the right direction.
Thank you, Mrs. Gregory. It's amazing. I've gotten some of the calls too, and some of the things that have been done. But I will say this, I've had discussions with several realtors who are friends of mine and who have said, and I told them the stories about the calls and about the techniques that were being used. And if you want to see some irate people, you should have heard those guys say those people should be arrested and taken care of. And these are fellow realtors. And it's a shame that we have to do this. It is. It's a shame that we have to address an issue that is, and most laws, by the way, I agree with what the mayor said, most laws are not written for the general public. Most of the people do the right thing. These are made for people who do the wrong thing. The only issue that I have with it, Mr. Mayor, and I would love to see, and I understand what Muir was saying about hurricane. This is something unique. And I think that any council in the future that would come up with, God forbid, another situation like we have with this, can handle it. I would like to see this be at the ending date of the end of the emergency. And then if it has to be handled in the future, bring another one forward. That would be my personal preference.
Yeah. So, Mr. President, the only problem I see there is that this is a legislative action. This is not an executive order. So I don't know that there's any legislative precedent for creating temporary law. But this, according to the Attorney General and Mr. Tillman, this is legislative in nature. What I'd recommend maybe is perhaps a clause that speaks to the conditions under which maybe narrowing the type of emergency order or the type of state of emergency or the underlying conditions of a state of emergency that this would take effect in, or the states of emergency that run longer than X number of days, something like that, rather than your run of the mill. Not that we have. I think I've declared a state of emergency 2 times, in 4.5 years. So I see your point. I saw Mr. Boda's point. I think some language to that effect. I also want to draw everyone's attention just to some insights that I got earlier today on the value of late fees and perhaps consideration before final adoption of this legislation of a balance between not wanting to allow any punitive late fee to accumulate that would hurt someone unnecessarily who was economically injured through the COVID-19 crisis through no fault of their own, but also ensuring that there is some motivator for collaborating, cooperating, communicating with a landlord on the part of tenants. So, I think tweaks, modifications are acceptable to me, and let's consider each of those things over the coming weeks or week.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that would be a solution. One of the solutions is put a time period. If a crisis extends for more than 4 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it comes up, I think that would resolve my concern. I could support that. And I think that Mr. Tillman will certainly be able to find the language to do that. Right, Mr. Tillman?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Just checking. All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate it. Thank you, Julia. That is the last item on the agenda. Ms. Glantz, do we have any requests for comments or things that were put on the chat?
No new ones, but I would imagine that the initial ones still exist. Brett is still on, John is still on, and Lynn. So if we want to go in that order, if you all still want to speak.
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine. Who's up first? Brett?
Who's first? Okay. This is Brett Hopkins. Real quick, I didn't want to reinvent the wheel, so I sent the mayor some language from Anne Arundel County on what they proposed in terms of limiting rent increases during the governor's emergency time period. And I think that's nice and clean. Hopefully, and that's what I sent to Julia on the chat. Maybe you look at that because it's pretty clean, fairly easy to understand. It's 1.5 pages long. It auto terminates 30 days after the governor lifts the emergency order, with no further action required by the city in any kind of way. In regards to late fees, what was just brought up by the mayor is a point that's well made in the sense that we always kind of want a carrot and stick approach in business. If you don't have a carrot and stick tool available to you, you have no way of rewarding the good actors and then persuading the bad actors to kind of get in line. It's the same thing that the city does to bad actors, whether it's a landlord or a resident or a taxpayer. I mean, you have to have a way to kind of motivate someone to change the behavior. If you take late fees away, we have no way of motivating someone to communicate with us. And why would they pay on time? Why would the good people continue to pay on time? They probably wouldn't. And so that adds financial stress to the small business, which happens to be the owner operator, and getting their bills paid, like was said on the council earlier. So I would just say potentially leave that alone. Let the market forces dictate that. We will work out payment plans and potentially even remove late fees if the person works with us on that payment plan. What then goes to the bigger point, and that is forcing us landlords to have payment plans using the word shall in there, up to and including 12 months after, I guess, the emergency order is lifted. That can be highly problematic and really, really hard to enforce. I mean, every payment plan may not be the same. So then you get into this fair housing issue. And then how do you go collect on it? Say they missed their second payment out of a 12-month payment plan. Now all of a sudden the payment plan is going to be null and void. Well, you use words like shall enforce or shall enable it for 12 months. We may not be able to change the payment plan 10 months, later. Or, I mean, even in the third month, if they blew up the payment plan that they agreed to in month 2 of a 12-month run. So I just, again, market forces are going to take care of a lot of this. Good landlords, of course, are always going to be good landlords. The bad ones are probably going to be bad. They should be hammered. They should have some severe financial penalties. And I'm sure anyone that had the experience that the mayor gave, they would lose in court 100% of the time, and they should if they had an illegal eviction. So I would just say, if you're going to go forward with some of this or all of it, that it'd be nice if we could have a couple people sit with you guys and talk about some of the details and maybe try and avoid some pitfalls.
Thank you, Brett. I'm sure we'll get the material that you submitted to the mayor, and we'll take a look at it.
Okay, thank you.
And okay, Julia, and who's next?
John Cannon, if he's still on.
Yes,
John?
thank you very much. Thank you. I apologize.
Now
for
you
not
can talk
understood-
about. Now you can talk about what you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Jack. I think I appreciate the council's initiative in trying to address these problems. You know, even as landlords, we certainly do empathize with tenants, especially with tenants who aren't able to pay due to unexpected circumstances such as COVID-19. My concern, for the most part, with this bill really lies with what Brett touched on, and that was the Section F, payment plans in its entirety. That can be very suspect. To begin with, for the most part, anytime we file judgments against individuals who haven't paid the rent, it goes to court. The judge gives them 7 days to pay, and if they can't, then the eviction process begins. So how is it that we're going to address this, even in a court of law, when there's a sub-plan involved that the city is implementing that says, oh, I know that the state law says 7 days, but now the city's going to say you have to do a payment plan. And for this payment plan to be mandatory and extend for a period of a year, what you're literally telling us is that we will not be able to evict that tenant for a year. Now think about what happens as well. You suggest a payment plan. Well, right now, we have tenants who haven't paid since March. I would share with you that majority of my tenants that are delinquent now were the same tenants that were delinquent in December or January or February. It's just by nature, they don't pay on time. But my real point is, with the freeze, with pretty much the courts freezing the entire system so that you cannot, as Brett suggested, sort of the carrot and the stick, you can't take them into court to get them to pay. Some need that incentive, believe it or not. But where we are now, most landlords where we have tenants who haven't paid rent in March now have tenants who are 3 months behind. If they're paying $800 a month, that tenant right now is delinquent, and we have some, in the amount of $2,400. Let's say you want to establish a payment plan for that individual, as would be required. I would say the only payment plan that might be acceptable for a tenant in that position would be $50 extra a month if they could do that. $50 a month would take them 4 years to pay it off. So if we follow this ordinance, in a sense, it would say that we would not be allowed to evict that person in 4 years. And what other extenuating circumstances might come into play? So it's I think it just needs to be more well thought out. It's good intentions, but I'm really concerned about that. The actual practicality of being able to impose that based on what the state requires when you go to landlord-tenant court, and what is feasible for the tenant to even be able to pay. I would only reiterate, and I appreciate the time, that this ordinance doesn't necessarily address evictions. I don't personally appreciate the unscrupulous landlords. I don't appreciate at all anyone that would take advantage of a tenant under any circumstances. Unfortunately, they are out there. The members of SAPOA, for the most part, feel the same way. But I think you cannot miss the point again that a lot of landlords, and several landlords who I manage their properties for, they are single family landlords. Their entire income depends on getting rent paid so that they can pay their mortgage, they can pay their taxes. I have one individual who is looking to go into their 401k to figure out how to make ends meet. So you may have concerns over tenants, but you can't ignore the rights and the the damage, the possible damage to these landlords. Again, the majority of all landlords only own 1 or 2 properties. And I think you have to look out for these individuals. Most people who are delinquent now will not be resolved for 6 months. So a landlord is very much losing half of their annual income just simply because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And you can't forget that. Thank you again very much. I appreciate everyone's attention.
Thank you, John. Thanks for your comments. Any other comments, Julia?
I think Lynn wants to speak.
Okay, Lynn.
He's muted.
Hang on a second, Lynn. I'm trying to unmute you. You can do it on your end. I don't.
Okay, we good? Okay. First of all, again, I think the intention was brought about by some folks who, as Jake Day mentioned a minute ago, some didn't know the rules. I understand that you've reached out to all of the landlords in question. At least that's my understanding. And I hope that they have a 2x4 placed somewhere effectively, because to do what you said they were doing was wrong, illegal, immoral, and should not have ever happened. With that said, I would say that the majority of us are decent people who want what's right for our tenants, our clients, and those that we've become friends with through this whole process of being a landlord. I would appreciate it if some of the adjectives that are used in that in the ordinance are removed. The adjective of unscrupulous I find to be very offensive and a broad brush for many of us who are not that. And I feel it paints a lot of us in a very bad light. And I would appreciate it very much if that adjective could be removed. I also have issues with the payment plan. I work with payment plans all the time with my people. And, you know, they're always kind of working on it. You do what you can do for as long as you can do it, but having the ability to finally go to court and kind of saying enough is enough actually has to happen sometimes. Without the courts, many of our clients have not been able to access some of the community agencies the way they have in the past either, because having that court document has normally been paramount to getting assistance, because it was something that put it in black and white what was owed, and they don't have that right now. So again, even getting assistance from some of the normal agencies that have been out there that have helped people for many, many years has not been an option for some of my clients. And I hope that we can work through some ways and some avenues to open that up. The money that's been earmarked is a lot of money. It's $105,000 if I read it correctly, but that's going to have to be passed out very cautiously, because as Mr. Cannon just indicated, some rents are $850, $900 a month, and that won't go very far if they're already 2 months behind. Some of my clients, the issue they're having is that they're still having trouble getting their stimulus checks or their unemployment. So we're reaching out to them with some possible solutions with that through our delegates and making some of the connections that landlords are doing all over the place. So again, we are all in this, as they say that comment, we're all in this together. Some of us are really advocating for our clients, maybe more than others. I'm sad that some felt they should take advantage or try to reclaim their properties. But I also understand Mr. Cannon's point that for some people, their payment that they have on those 1 or 2 houses, that has to be paid. And if that doesn't get paid, then other things don't get paid. So let's look at collaboratively coming up with some language that everybody can work with. I think Mr. Hopkins' suggestion, Mayor Day, that possibly you get part of this, you know, our side of the stakeholders at the table with you as you do that. I think that would be a fantastic suggestion. Thank you very much, and I hope everybody has a safe evening.
Thank you, Lynn. Any other comments for the good of the order, Mr. Mayor?
I think there are other commenters in the thread. I'm seeing.
Oh, are there?
Oh, yes. Jared would like to speak. Jared Shibling.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I hope everyone is well and safe. I just would like to thank the council for putting forth much needed relief for the COVID-19 crisis for working people. As we've noticed, Washington is not able to get it done very successfully at the moment with the infighting. I would strongly urge this council to keep the language strong and not weaken it. I'm disappointed to hear many folks in this chat within the landlord community who are referring to their tenants in a way as if they're bad people, as they're people that they need to be cautious of, as people that they are afraid are not going to pay them. So I think we should utilize this opportunity to give relief to working people. It's very rare in this country that there is relief offered to working people, especially with the COVID crisis, where many people who work in industries such as the seafood industry, the retail industry, and other major industries in this area are losing their jobs, are getting their hours cut, are struggling to make it by day to day. I don't think this is a case of renters just not wanting to pay the bill or wanting to get it over on their landlord. I think this is actually a case of people are struggling to get by and we should give them aid. Thank you. I ask that you guys keep the language strong. Thank you for allowing me to comment.
Thank you, Jared. Appreciate it. Let's go through the council first for remarks for the good order. Mr. Boda, any comments?
Again, appreciate the input from those on the comments tonight. I think there is a balance, but I also think that what we do, it has to have something behind it, and it has to be strong. I hope but I do think that there's also educational piece that we educate people on, making sure, if you're in a situation that you can't pay, you're not getting your unemployment, there's a communication process that has to happen too. So I think our responsibility does go both ways for both people that are involved in the contract. So other than that, I appreciate Mayor bringing this issue forward. And, we certainly, I think we're going to come to something that's going to be fair to everybody. Lastly, as I've been saying, support your local businesses. Many of our restaurants are open. They've redefined their business models, and they're continuing to do that as we reopen some more. And so I think some of the towns across the shore, and East Sam is going to be sending a letter to the governor to encourage maybe speeding up the outdoor dining. I know Salisbury is ready to go with it, but I know I've talked to a few towns this afternoon, and I think we're going to move forward in supporting that suggestion as well. And again, like I said earlier, our restaurants are still selling Scrapple. Scrapple is available at grocery stores, so we're okay. We're going to be fine. We're going to get through this. And I love everybody. Take care of your neighbor and support our local businesses. God bless.
Thank you, Mr. Boda. Ms. Jackson.
No, he didn't say Scrapple again. But what we must remember that we're in a pandemic and we're in a crisis, and everybody is going through. So what we must be mindful of is that we do what is right for ourselves and for others. And that's all I have to say. And I'll just say, if you have money, your stimulus, your unemployment, whatever, do not take advantage of this situation. Pay your bills. Because just like I said earlier, these people, these realtors, these landlords also need their money to survive. So just make sure you do what is right by yourself, by your family, and by whoever you're renting from or leasing from or whatever. And just have a good evening. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, April. Ms. Blake?
I just want to appreciate everybody who did make comments in regards to proposed legislation. I did take some notes, and I think it's worth the discussion. And I know that we're going to continue thinking about it. I do think it's a really good thing overall. Well, maybe we need to fine tune it, maybe some of the language, but I'm for it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Angela. Mrs. Gregory?
I just want everybody to stay safe, use your masks, stay home if at all possible, and definitely support the local businesses. I've been supporting local businesses from takeout way more than I should, but please, please stay safe.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, give me 1 second.
No problem.
Couple closing thoughts. One, I want to thank each of the council members for sharing their perspective before today and today on this legislation and where it fits into all we're trying to do for those who are hard hit by the crisis that we're in. One thing that I want to reiterate, if it's not clear, is that I think it is our moral obligation to pass this legislation and to defend it, and to defend every aspect of it once passed. I do think that there are reasonable conversations that can be had in the coming days before its final passage on some of the specific questions brought up. But again, I think it's important to equip the executive branch of this government to protect people, and it's going to require the legislative branch to adopt a strong law here. I also want to point out that as written, that the discussion on FHA compliance is an important one. And as written, everything in here would be compliant with the FHA, with Fair Housing Act, but it would require an equal offer or an offer of equal flexibility be made to any tenant who requests it. And that certainly I understand is a good point brought by Mr. Hopkins. Additionally, I think there are 4 topics that have been brought up for consideration: the payment plans, the type of pandemic, late fees, and the backdating to March 5th of, or the reimbursement required of any increase since March 5th. I still feel that the language is written appropriately, but I'm open to modified language. And then lastly, I want to point out that we've got about $750,000 worth of incentives proposed in today's next step package, $750,000. And $500,000 of those dollars are going to have to come from our coffers at a time when we know we are not going to meet revenue expectations this year or next. But still, it's the right thing to do. Now, I want you to compare that in scale to the $18 million that we're about to receive, that Wycomico County is about to receive in CARES Act funding, $9 million of which is going to go to our small businesses. And I think that's exactly where it should go. However, I want to point out that property management companies, landlords are businesses and will be eligible for each of those $9 million. It's going to be important that we make sure our small businesses are made whole with funding for small businesses. And this is not intended to create or support any us versus them or oppositional dynamic between landlords and tenants. Rather, it's intended to recognize the imbalance in the consequences of the exertion of power in that relationship during a pandemic. And I hope that we help to protect those with limited capability and limited knowledge, particularly with the notice aspect of the legislation in the coming days. But again, I hope that every small business in this community is afforded the opportunity to be made whole. I hope that every small business in this community is able to receive grant funding. I'm disappointed that state and federal dollars have not reached their end recipients the way they should. And that goes not only for businesses, but also for individuals. The unemployment money has been, I think, a particular embarrassment to our state. So I say thank you to everybody for the robust discussion. I also want to acknowledge what I think is Ms. Bratton's objection to language, that this is not in any way intended to be incendiary or an indictment of people as an industry or as a whole, rather a protection. And I think we can take a look at language to ensure that people who are good actors and do look out for the best interests of others are not indicted unnecessarily or unfairly. So thank you. That's all I've got, Mr. President, and thanks for letting me be heard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I echo what the mayor just said. And also I'd just like to remind everybody, we are still in desperate need of blood. The numbers are demanding that we're low in inventory. And if you're capable of giving blood, please do so. Please maintain social distancing, wear your mask when you're outside, and we'll get through this. Thank you, everybody who participated today. Thanks to the landlords. We had good discussion, good feedback, and everything's being taken under consideration, and we appreciate it. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.